All right, good morning. My name is Mike Sawchuk. I am the Commissioner for the Department of Public Safety here in the lovely state of Maine. Thank you very much for joining us. As I stated yesterday in the afternoon conversation, for the consideration of the 4 deaf victims and their family, we are requesting that the ASL interpreter is in all frames for language access here in Maine and the U.S. They are grieving and have a right to know the latest information in ASL. Thank you for that. All right, we do appreciate your patience and your professionalism. I know you've been with us now for a few days away from your families, tucked in here with Lewiston, working with us. So we're going to go ahead and kind of focus again on the operational side of the house. It's intended that I'm your only speaker for this morning. I suppose if we do get some Q&A that somebody else I think can answer readily, we'll do that, and we'll do the best we can for you. And for the state of Maine and the community here. So I do want to start right at 7:45 last night when Mr. Card was located deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and that did occur at the Maine Recycling Corporation, and that's at 61 Capitol Ave in Lisbon. And we're going to try to put that right up here on the screen. The audio visual is a little better than the chalkboard we had on day one. So this should show a map, a Google map location of where the Maine Recycling Corporation is located at. And I wanted to show this. This is the primary reason that we're late, because we were trying to get this switched over from Google Maps to something that you could utilize. So when you look at this, there's a triangle here. That stop right there. Yeah, exactly. That triangle is, in fact, the Maine Recycling Corporation. And if we go down across Capitol Avenue to where that circle is, that's the overflow parking location where he was found deceased in a trailer. So, and I think that's important because we were asked some good questions last night that we did not have the answers to at that point. So that particular location was cleared twice previously, and it was cleared in that triangle. It was cleared where the business is located, and that was cleared by Chief McGee and the Lisbon Police Department and individuals there earlier, and a joint or a combination tactical team later in the afternoon. The owner of that facility did a great job because he was like, you know, this individual knows the property. He could be tucked in the back of one of these trailers because they're full of recycled metal and all this stuff. You could crawl over the top. Well, we cleared the trailers. We cleared trailers that are there on that business footprint. Nobody had any idea that across the street, across Capitol Avenue, there's an overflow parking lot, which is the Recycling Corporation property. So the owner was very diligent to say, well, did you clear those trailers? Well, what trailers are you talking about? So then the follow-up is with the tactical team commanders to say, okay, tell me exactly where you were at. And then they were doing the same thing. We were looking at our timeline. We cleaned trailers. We didn't clear those. Let's go back. So the Maine State Police tactical team ultimately were the ones that located the body within one of those trailers. And this is a tractor trailer style. You know, you picture that 18-wheeler. This is what a trailer would look like. A box trailer is where he was located, right in the back of that. Some of those trailers are locked. Some of those trailers aren't. So he was found inside one of those boxes that was unlocked from the outside. And that you can probably picture that from just your experience on the street, right? You've seen those kind of things before. So that's where we found the body last night. A little bit of updates in that regard. We're going to be there probably through the end of the day, making sure that we process that particular scene. And we'll also be at the bar and grill and the bowling alley probably through the rest of the weekend. We're currently working that now, and we will definitely be working that tomorrow. And at this point, that is heavily resourced by evidence response team members. So ETs are processing physical evidence at those locations. Again, as we've discussed, there's a reason for that. That's a lot of material still there to work with. So we expect that we'll work through the weekend there. I would also just tell you that the behind-the-scenes stuff is a very intensive manhunt, an incredible amount of resources invested. Once he's located last night, truth be told, we got some people some rest. Hopefully you got some sleep last night. So we sent some people home. They're back in this morning, all in for today. We're going to send them back to get some rest tomorrow. They can see their families and be back in on Monday, the entire team, to include our partners, which I am going to take more time today to make sure that I acknowledge everybody that I can. So they'll be back in on Monday to continue their work, whether it's scene cleanup, continuing to do interviews. Overall, we received 821-ish as of a little while ago, tips and leads, so we continue to work those. The digital tip line, that video tip line that you were so helpful in putting the information out on, ultimately we're at 197 of those leads, and that's information that was uploaded to that system. Got about a dozen or so search warrants that are completed, so signed and impounded meaning that you wouldn't have access to them at this point. But given the circumstances here, right, because we don't envision a trial of any sort for anybody that's involved here, the release of information I would expect after those affidavits, that impound is pulled, there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be there for you down the road. Again, we'll try to do the best we can today now that that piece of this event is done and he's been found. We're certainly able to answer additional questions. Everything we say can be interpreted by a suspect. They just said this about me, I'm going to go do that. And again, based on the violent nature of what occurred here, the traumatic incidents that occurred here in Lewiston, we were certainly concerned right into the last second that we didn't know what this individual was going to do next or where he was going to do it. So we need to be very cautious about that. We also need to be very cautious when you talk about trials, one information. So Mike's at the podium and he said this. And then at trial, 2 years later, they say, well, didn't you say this? And now you think this because you found it in a cell phone. All those things, we need to make sure that we're not being prejudicial for trials and for the court process. So again, from our end, about a dozen or so of those warrants, and everybody will continue to work on that. I think there's some additional information that I mentioned I was going to speak to you about today, and that is the addition of a family assistance center. And that family assistance center is going to be located at the Lewiston Armory at 65 Central Ave, right here in Lewiston, so 65 Central Ave. And that's intended to be a one-stop shop kind of thing, one central space for victims and their support persons to gather so that they don't have to make multiple stops for multiple different agencies to seek assistance. Now, this particular location is open for individuals who were present at the shooting site. So whether you were victim, physically stating that you were injured during this event, or you were there and traumatized, in either one of those situations, the Family Assistance Center will be a good spot for those individuals to go. I will say that this is probably, again, common sense, but the media will not be allowed to enter the Family Assistance Center. We want these folks focused on healing, not on, hey, am I in camera? What are people going to think? I don't want anybody to know I was there. So if you could do me a favor and help me out with that, that would be greatly appreciated. Now, that's the Maine State Police are working with the Maine Attorney General's Office, the Red Cross, and the FBI Victim Services Division, who have been incredible, and they're opening that space. That space actually opened this morning at 10, and they're going to be operational for the foreseeable future from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Lewiston Armory at 65 Central Ave. A separate location or a separate site providing mental health assistance, and that's going to be located at the Ramada Inn here in Lewiston, and that's created for the larger community. So again, as we've discussed, you have the scene, but the entire city is a scene, right? People that are traumatized, I know somebody that knows somebody that knows something, or I walk by that, I've been to that bar before, I bowl there, that wasn't my night. But you want to talk to somebody about that. That's going to be at the Ramada Inn. So you're not necessarily a victim, a specific victim of what occurred, or somebody that was present when this occurred. And I mention that, and I mention that in this setting because as these things evolve, we have an investigation, and now this will slowly evolve over to a wellness and a resiliency conversation for the community and for the victims and others. And that's the information that we want to make sure that folks are getting so that they can receive the help that they need. I would also say that once we clear these scenes, and I want to make sure I acknowledge this individual. A Mike Halloran, who's a retired law enforcement officer out of Mass, owns a trauma service cleanup company. And Mike gives us a shout and says, you know, when you clear those scenes, I'm willing to come up and donate the services of my company to clean all of these crime scenes, which, as you can imagine, or probably can't imagine, is an incredibly traumatic process to begin with. So we clear the scenes. We have all the evidence that we need. This company is going to come up, the Trauma Service Cleanup Company, with Mike Halloran. They'll do the cleanups, and then we'll release those locations back to the owners so that they're not forced to deal with that first thing when they walk back into something, their hopes and dreams. I always wanted to open a bar, and they're going to be surrounded by the chaos that would have occurred that evening. So that will be the next steps there. So that's probably early next week. I gave you a little bit of information reference to the detectives, the major crime units, and all of our federal partners that are working with us there. We will be transitioning from our current command post back to the Lewiston Police Department. As you might imagine, the parking lot was a little bit different today than it was yesterday, right? So our command post, the next big step for the incident management team is to kind of demobilize. I think when these things happen, the first piece is we don't have enough people to do the work we need to do. And then the second piece is we have so many people to do the work that we can do. How can we track them? How can we feed them? Where are they at, and are they safe? So we're going to be fully invested in the demobilization of that location and the personnel that are involved throughout today and into tomorrow. So I do want to touch on a couple other questions that have been asked along the way. And with clearance from our prosecutors and our detectives, we're certainly more comfortable answering now based on the current outcome of what happened last night. So one thing, there's been a number of completely legitimate questions about a note that was found in his residence. So this is a paper-style note. I'm not going to read it to you verbatim, but what it is it's a note to a loved one, and is saying that this is the passcode for my phone, this is the bank account numbers, and I wouldn't describe it as a explicit suicide note, but the tone and tenor was that the individual was not going to be around and wanted to make sure that this loved one had access to his phone and whatever was in his phone. We're working on that now to get into the phone. That's one of those search warrants. That's one of those very specialized skill set that our folks have. And then the bank codes to make sure that that happens. That's not uncommon in suicide situations. You get long loads, you get very set up scenarios, but that's something that you asked about, and I do appreciate that. And again, we can talk about that a little bit more now. There was a firearm found in the white Subaru station wagon. That was a long gun style. I don't not have the make and model. You could ask me, is that an AR-15 or is that a this? I don't know that. But I was asked yesterday specifically, did they find a gun? Did we find a gun in the car? And we did. And that was a long gun. And to my understanding, that was the only firearm that was found inside the car at that time. I would expect, again, based on the investigation and the outcome, that when these impounded affidavits are released, there'll be search warrant lists, and they'll have all kinds of stuff. What did we find, and how many of this, and how many of that? So that'll be much more detailed. So did you find guns in the house? Did you find guns on him? So that is something that we've been asked about, and I wanted to make sure that we covered that as well. Another question that I've had some conversations around this morning. You know, if you talk about is there a motive here, right? I think clearly there's a mental health component to this. We still need to do some research around trying to get access to certain records and things of that nature. Which again, you could probably imagine is not just as simple as he just calling somebody, hey, can you send me this thing? But what I would say is, based on what I've heard through conversations this morning, I don't see, or I'm told that we don't have access to any forcibly committed for treatment information reference to Mr. Card, okay? So you can volunteer, as an example, to go to a facility and seek treatment for months on end. But if you're not forcibly committed to seek that treatment, and it's very specific to treatment, right? Not forcibly taken for an evaluation is completely different than treatment. So there are a lot of very specific criteria around firearms, and are you a possessed person, or prohibited person rather, and what that looks like. So in this scenario, we have not seen to this point, I have not seen to this point, that Mr. Card was forcibly committed for treatment. And if that didn't happen, then the NICS check, you could go into a firearms dealer who does all of their work, and the background check is not going to ping that this individual is prohibited. And something that's incredibly important for us to say, and for me to say, and I find myself saying it on a regular basis, just because there's appears to be a mental health nexus to this scenario, the vast majority of people, with a mental health diagnosis will never hurt anybody. They won't hurt themselves. They're not a danger to the community. Based on percentages alone, there's a bunch of folks in here that have a mental health diagnosis. I know law enforcement officers that have a mental health diagnosis. That doesn't mean they're a danger to the community. We certainly have people that reach that crisis level where that does occur, and we deal with those folks on a regular basis, sometimes through involuntary, forcible commitments, right? And sometimes not. Sometimes there's different levels of that mental health system, and that's a whole different conversation that can be quite lengthy. And I can tell you that law enforcement has been involved at this point for decades and heavily involved over the last 15 years or so. So I think that is the information that I know I wanted to come back and give you. And I would also just say again that there's information that we think we can give lawfully and through our subject experts around prosecutions and all these other things. I may want to tell you something that I can't tell you. And that's just been the nature of the beast here along the way a little bit. I also want to mention this. It's a big deal. I was asked about cooperation of the family at one point. This family has been incredibly cooperative with us. Truth be told, I think the first 3 people that called us to positively identify this individual based on the photos that were released were family members. And unfortunately, what happens in a scenario like this is that this happens, they're connected to this family, and that family has taken a great deal of grief, to include threats, people hanging out at their houses, and saying, do they know? Is it their fault? Are they enabling? All of those things. Our investigation would have been incredibly, it would have been detrimental if they didn't come forward immediately to let us know who this individual was. And how difficult a decision is that to make when you've lost this many people? It's not that difficult, but you can imagine that my family member was involved in that traumatic event, and I want to let people know. So that they should be acknowledged in that. Again, I won't specify exactly who the family members were, but as a whole, we found them to be very, very cooperative. I will also state that, from an after-action perspective, you can imagine that all of the law enforcement officers, the various agencies involved, the rest of the public safety world, we will be having a number of after-action reports, lessons learned. We don't want this to ever happen to anybody ever again, but we've learned a lot as a state from other communities around the country where this has happened, other communities internationally where these things have happened, and they put out best practices, and this is what's happened, and what are we going to do next? So I would expect those things to continue. None of the entities that are involved in that, certainly not the Department of Public Safety, are regulatory authorities. Like, hey, we have the authority over what happened over here, and we're going to act on that. So there's a time and place for all of those things, to include that mental health system. There's a military component. There's all those different things which has their own networks to regulate and make sure that they're checking their own processes, and I think that's rightfully so. So I think what I want to make sure I do, and I want to make sure we switch that screen back over to that victim screen to make sure that we all remember why we're here and why we do the work that we do. And I also want to state that because I think when we leave here today, I'm not expecting future briefings or anything else, and I don't want to leave our partners out of this. I've discussed them every time we've talked. But if you talk about Chief McGee and the Lisbon Police Department, all the work that they've done, the strong focus on Lisbon, it kind of morphed over or Lewiston, and it kind of morphed over to Lisbon with the finding of the vehicle. But Chief McGee and his team and his community have really, really stepped up across the board. And they deserve a lot of credit as a strong partner of this entire thing. And the New Hampshire State Police, I can't tell you, I mean, that helicopter was floating over us very, very quickly, and there is New Hampshire State Police and tactical teams and detectives, command staff members that came to us immediately, across the board. From our federal partnerships, what happens in these is that everybody's got incredibly long titles that are accurate and they mean a whole lot. But when you talk about the ATF, you talk about HSI, you talk about DEA, you talk about the FBI, you talk about, we're down to first name deals, right? So you talk about Kevin, you talk about Jim, you talk about Mike at HSI, you talk about Jody. That's who we are now, right? And it's going to be valuable in the future to have that first name basis in case something else happens, across the board. And certainly, the Maine State Police, as the lead major crimes and investigators on this scenario, have been in the forefront of this since the very, very beginning. Whether we have our elected officials here from various communities, we have IF&W, my fellow commissioner Judy Camuso is here. Let's not forget that hunting is open today. I want to make sure that we discuss that for sure. And I guess I would just close on that. On the acknowledgement, again, of Chief St. Pierre and the work that him and his team have done. They've made their community proud. They've made the state of Maine proud, and we're lucky to have them as part of the Department of Public Safety. So with that in mind, I'm going to try to do some Q&A. We'll see how this goes. I wrote myself a note. I'm supposed to repeat the question before I answer it because nobody can hear it. So right here, ma'am.
Yes, we talked about the victims who were killed. What about the victims who were injured? What's their current condition, and can you identify any of them?
I can't identify any of the victims at this point. My understanding is the last update that I received that there was 3 people in critical care, and I don't have any more specifics reference to the remaining 10 in that scenario. And as you might imagine, these individuals passed away because of this crime. And these other folks have to live with the rest of their lives. So I'm not sure that they want to be identified in the sense. We've had victims' families with media members and others parked across the street. They feel nervous. They feel scared. So we're not in a position that we're going to identify them. And sir, right here? Yeah.
Based on what you've learned so far, why did the suspect target the bowling alley and the bar?
I would say that the mental health aspect of this, there's a piece of that. Where there's paranoia, there's some conspiracy theorist piece that I think what I've read and what I've seen is that the individual felt like people were talking about him. It may even appear that there were some voices in play here. And we don't believe that any of that is accurate. I think that led him specifically back to those 2 specific locations. And it also led us to where's he going next? He used to work here, he used to be there, and what's that going to ultimately look like? So I think that's a valid question. Right here?
Commissioner, can you go back to the recycling center? What was
the suspect's connection to that facility? Was he a former employee?
There was an employment relationship there at some point. I don't know if he was currently employed or not, and I don't think I'm in a position to answer that. I would kind of lean towards the business owner, and he's been part of this very forthcoming that got us back to that location to check. So I don't want to speak on his behalf of exactly where Mr. Carrs or what his status was at the end.
How long was he deceased?
I don't know that yet, and I think that comes down to the autopsy in many ways. They say, he passed away of this, cause and manner of death, and then they'll be able to give a range of some sort of how long he's been passed away, but I don't know how exactly tight that's going to be. But, sir, did you have a question? Yeah. That was the one. All right, perfect. It's a twofer. Yes, ma'am.
On the discovery of the body, if there's apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, the condition of the body when you found it, the actual discovery of finding him in that trailer?
Yeah, sure. So you know, from a discovery standpoint of the status of the body itself, when you're talking about a few days, there's not a great deal of decomposition in that time frame. So it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I will tell you, there was a couple of firearms found at the scene. I won't be able to tell you exactly what that was. The one picture that I saw looked like he had the same sweatshirt on that he had the picture that we put out at the bowling alley. That's appeared to be the sweatshirt that he was wearing at that time. He was found closer to the sliding door component of the trailer, so he wasn't buried back further. When that happened, you know, when he took his own life, I don't know the answer to that. And again, we'll probably have a range-ish from the medical examiner's office, but not something I know right now. Right here? Yeah.
Can you help us understand anything that you know about his movements, how he was able to evade so many law enforcement partners for the amount of time that he was?
Yeah, super question, right? So again, a bit of an anomaly from a scenario, right? We have two locations. He escapes both, parks his car someplace else. And I want that picture to stay up there. But if you looked at that Google map, from the Lisbon location, but I'm going to screw up the boat launch terminology again. What is that again, Ryan?
It's the Spanish River Bridge boat ramp, which is the entrance to the Paper Mill Trail.
So that trail actually runs from that boat launch all the way along the Androscoggin River, and you can see it on that Google map. So that comes all the way down along the river, and then that overflow parking lot is there, again, next to a business that he's familiar with as well. So there is a natural connection. Is that planned? Is that not planned? Is that a location of convenience? I don't know the answer to that, but that's kind of how that went down. But right in the back, ma'am?
So going back to these maps, so you mentioned previously that sort of triangle section had been searched twice before,
Yeah.
but he was found in that sort of overflow parking area. Had that area specifically been searched for before?
No. No, it had not. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. You just said, I think, that 2 firearms were found with his body. So can you just clarify, does that mean that in all there were 3 firearms on his person? One found in the car and then 2 on his body?
Yes. 1 in the car, 2 on his body.
And can you give us any details? The one in the car you've said was a long gun.
It was a long gun. It was a rifle of some sort. I don't know.
And the 2 the 2 with his body?
I don't have that information. They're still working that scene right now, so that's not something I'll clarify for now. Right here, ma'am? I'm going to kind of work my way. I'm going to try to get to everybody if everybody's cooperative, and we'll try to get as many as we can.
If any video or you saw any video of the suspect playing cornhole at the bar?
And I just read my note that said repeat the question, which I haven't done yet. So could you ask that one more time?
Can you confirm that you've seen video or there's video of the suspect playing cornhole at the bar?
So is there video, or can we confirm that there's video of the suspect playing cornhole at the bar? No, I have not seen that. There's a lot of video yet to view from the locations, as well as those 197. I don't know how often this individual frequented the bar, if there's a timestamp on when that would have occurred. I don't know the answer to that at all.
What about frequenting the bowling alley?
I think that there's a connection to all of those locations. I think both of those spots. I will tell you from a community standpoint, a lot of people in this community were familiar with both spots, right? So this thing happens, and everybody's like, I was there once before. My family visits that spot. So there was a lot of that was going on, and I do believe there's a connection, as if this gentleman had been in both of those spots. Want to give it another shot, sir?
Yeah, I got another question. We haven't talked a lot about what he was doing in the hours leading up to the shootings.
Mm-hmm.
Did he case the locations at all? Was he driving around? Can you shed any light on that?
So we haven't focused a lot of time on the time frame leading up to the crimes themselves. And no, I really can't flesh that out. I do think that what happens from here is those neighborhood canvases, and we say, okay, so this happened. We know this call came in at 6:56. We know that call came in at 7:08. Can we follow that suspect vehicle, that white Subaru station wagon? Can we track that with video in 100 different locations? I've seen those ring cams, convenience store, someplace out front, and then can we time gap that so we know exactly what happened, and then we left this location in that car. We know somehow we ended up at the boat launch. Can we try to figure out what that looks like? So I don't have any information. Was he casing the place that day, or clearly he had some knowledge of these locations previously, however?
I'm assuming you're looking into that.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. That's part of that. Again, he's dead. We know where he's located at. We can start working with our victims. We can also start digging in on all of these other things. But, sir?
Yeah, so did you say that you don't know of any forcible mental health visits, or there were not any forcible mental health visits?
There's none that I'm aware of. We've had people check that have told me that they haven't found those. So if they exist, I'm sure we'll continue to dig and try to find them, but I haven't found them.
So quick follow-up to that then.
Yeah.
We're learning there may have been from a local source high up in law enforcement that we have. If you found that the yellow flag law should have been enacted, how will you hold those responsible?
So that's a pretty good hypothetical from whoever your source is. We'll have to look at the actual snapshot in time. The yellow flag law in the state of Maine is very specific about an individual that's in protective custody from law enforcement to begin with. And do we have probable cause to believe that they are in possession, they could be in possession of dangerous weapons? So if we meet those criteria, then you can take an individual in for a yellow flag assessment, a weapons restriction order assessment. And at that time, your criteria change from a likelihood of serious harm to likelihood of foreseeable harm. There's a little, it's close, sort of.
I guess my broader question would be, will you work to try to prevent things like this from happening in the future, and how might that be?
I would tell you that the weapons restriction order in Maine has been utilized 82 times to this point. It went into effect on July 1 of 2020. I know that because I've read every single one of those reports and am involved in that process on a regular basis. Just gave a presentation last Friday to a group of social workers to make sure that we're putting that information out there as much as humanly possible. It has been effective to this point, and it's certainly something that we're always looking at. Can we tweak it? Can we make things better? But it has been utilized, and to this point it is being effective. But ma'am, you had a question?
You've talked a lot about the mental health component and being part of his motivation. Is there any other aspect that you can tell us about for a possible motive that led to him targeting the bowling alley and then the bar?
I think that what we know is we have a lot of work yet to do on phones and technology. Are we going to find a concrete motive that says this is what I'm going to do and this is why? At this point, we certainly know that there's a strong mental health cloud over this, what happened, the true tragic scenarios at both of those locations. We know that there's definitely a mental health nexus to that. Specifically, is there another reason? When you talking about paranoia, you're talking about individuals in crisis. There's a lot there. What was actually happening versus what they perceived to be happening. So all those things are definitely on our radar. But in the back, ma'am, and I'm going to come up to you.
What was the status of your search before you found the body? Did you have other leads leading you to this parking area, or was it just the owner of the recycling center saying, hey, and when did he tell you guys to look in that parking lot again? And then can you also confirm that you believe he walked the trail to the parking lot from the boat ramp?
So the two questions there, did we have additional leads, reference to the overflow lot where he was ultimately located, and can we confirm that he walked? Number two, we haven't found a vehicle or any other, a bicycle or a motor. There's no other information to lead us believe that there was anything but walking down. I suppose something could happen to lead us in that direction. So there's whatever that is, 800 and something leads and tips. The primary reason that we were back in that location is because, I will say this, from a community policing, from a relationship standpoint, the owner of a business calls his police chief and says, hey, I want somebody to make sure that they're clearing that. That's good cop 101, right? They have an automatic connection with somebody in your community. That's why the additional follow-ups occurred. Because we had, again, searched and documented. There's logs and all this stuff about when we were there, who was there, what did they do, which allowed us to do the follow-up work to say, well, did you check across the street? Well, what's across the street? There's a dozen businesses that surround this thing, and nothing that says that's the recycling corporation. So the owner was diligent, and as was Chief McGee, and then passing that information on to the command post and then ultimately being checked. So, sir, right here in the middle. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the use of canines in that exact location. Were they used to try and pick up his scent before before he was found in that trailer, like just in the days leading up, like he was at the boat location, and he had walked that trail. So were canines used to try and pick up his scent?
I don't know the specific answer to that. I would think that they would be, but I don't want to guess. Canines are a standard part of, we lost somebody here, where did they go? We have tactical canines that are attached to those various teams. We have a lot of great dogs that are out there working the streets. So I don't know the answer, but I can only imagine from a best practice standpoint, sure, that of course they would do that. Did you have another question? And I'm gonna.
I did. Can you clarify whether you guys have found anything that would confirm that this was premeditated at all? And if you have, then what was it that you may have found?
We have not. There's been no additional information. However, we know that there were 2 specific target locations. He did go one to the other. He ditched his car in a specific spot. Again, maybe we'll find additional information in one of these devices that says, this is what my plan was. All we can do is look at what actually occurred. So there's nothing there. How long was it planned? What did that look like? I don't know that right now. Ma'am, did you have a question about it?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, how exactly did he die?
How exactly did he die? So the question was, how exactly did he pass away? And that was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Is the apparent reason for his death?
How did he?
I won't give it a specific location, I don't think, for today, but it's kind of moving, ma'am, right here.
In terms of the 2 shooting scenes, are investigators still actively collecting evidence there? I know yesterday you said it could still take a few more days. Any sense in when it could be cleared?
Yeah, so I've heard through the weekend at both of those locations, and then we'll transition over to that cleaning and some of that other information that I put out. Sir?
You mentioned a dozen or so search warrants that you guys are working with. Can you tell me how many of those have been executed, and if some of them haven't? What specifically are you looking for with each of these?
I don't have the information there because one may be a search warrant on a cell phone, right? One may be a house. So I don't have a breakdown of exactly what warrants are going where and what that looks like. Some of those have been served, some of those we have, and they're kind of in the queue as a part of a punch list. This is where we're going next, and this is what we're doing. Absolutely. We're still working on those.
A quick follow-up. I know Lewiston is a small community, but is there any indication that he had a prior relationship with any of the victims?
I can't speak to that specifically. I think that would speak to premeditation and something as a motive above and beyond the mental health crisis that we know exists. But all of those follow-ups continue because you have the victims themselves clearly that have passed away, but we're also talking to everybody that he ever knew, right? Somebody he worked with, somebody he was in the military with. What did you know and how and all of those kind of things. So that continues. But, sir?
I want to get back to the 2 previous searches. And
Okay.
First, thanks for answering all these questions today. And I think this is important because, I've spent a lot of time in Lisbon, and in that community, certainly, just from the lockdown of the shelter-in-place has suffered greatly. And I'm wondering, as you sit here today, do you think something more thorough search could have been done in that location, whether it's surging more resources to that location? Because, I saw the chief out there with his officers on their own doing a lot of these searches. And the question becomes, should have more resources surged into that area? Because it seems like this one trailer was just missed. No one thought to search it. And we didn't really see a surge of resources into that area until yesterday. There was a much bigger presence yesterday than there had been previously.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you were thinking about that now, because it did affect this community. People were in tears, just going to the supermarket to shop. It was so difficult for them.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you're thinking about that at all today.
So the question is, do we think now we should have surged additional resources to that area, either those 2 searches or otherwise? And I think we had a great deal of resources in play. I think we had resources all over the place, resources that maybe you saw, maybe you didn't see 24/7, 365 out on the street. I know that Chief McGee was working with fellow chiefs to bring him additional resources. I've seen that email string like, hey, we're trying to have 2-person cars from a safety perspective. We want to make sure that we're properly staffed across the board. Another incredibly positive aspect of this is that search that Chief McGee led was because one of his officers found an open door to that facility. Right? So that's what's happening. People go to bed, whether they can sleep or not, and all night long, there are police officers crawling through their neighborhoods, looking at these businesses, looking at their backyards, trying to make sure that everybody's safe. So I will, for the rest of my life, be, looking at this event and saying, could we done this different? Could we do that different? I think we had resources in play, and our hearts go out. The reason we do this work is because of the trauma that is caused to our communities, all communities, when these things happen. So it's a completely legitimate question, but not one that I think was resource intensive for that particular area. But sir, in the middle,
Can I just follow
why don't
up?
you follow up? Good, I'll give you that one.
In those two searches, was it just the Lisbon police?
No.
Or did you have other officers?
Yep.
So you had other officers?
So Chief McGee led that one search, and then there was also a combined tactical team that did an additional search. But again, as the reason that we were late and we wanted to put that map up there is because if I told you, they didn't know about the overflow location, I wanted to be able to show you why that is, right? There's a business here, you cross the road, there's this overflow parking lot that I don't think, me personally, would have naturally connected, that this business is connected to that. If it's all in the same lot, because these tactical team commanders, as an example, well, did you check trailers? And the answer is, yeah, we checked the trailers that were there. And then the owner, again, being diligent and knowing his property, said, well, did you check those trailers? Which trailers? Well, the ones across the road, down here across Central Ave. And the answer was, no, we didn't go over there. That's not what we were there to do. So I think that they did their due diligence across the board. But sir, in the middle?
So Michael, thanks for your time to answer these questions. I guess two things I wanted to ask you. In terms of that note, is there a timeline on when you think that may have been written? Was it that day before he proceeded to the shootings? And then secondly, on that trailer, do you think he may have been in the woods and then doubled back there? Legitimately missed, the first time possibly because he didn't check, but maybe he wasn't there?
So I think two different questions there. One, reference to the timing of the note, and then how he got to that trailer, when he got to that trailer. All we can say for the note component of this is simply saying that we know when the initial shooting happened. I think as we try to backtrack through his day, which was an earlier question, can we identify where he was at a certain time in comparison to the shooting at 6:56, and then know in the middle? So he must have had it there at some point. Maybe there's a technology piece of this. The phone stopped moving at a certain spot. Maybe there's going to be additional information there. And when he went to the trailer, how he got to the trailer, I would like to think that we're going to get some additional information there, but I haven't seen it yet, and we're going to continue to work it. So, yes, right here.
Did Mr. Card have any prior interactions with law enforcement in the area in the days, the weeks, the months leading up to this tragedy?
Somebody has told me that there was an OUI investigation from like 2007, but I'm not going to go in depth because I don't know enough about that. I don't want to lead you astray or give you the wrong information. And that question was reference to interaction with law enforcement as well as criminal history. But, sir?
Thank you for taking the time. Sure. A question for the ATF. Can you either tell us or tell the commissioner so he can tell us the make and model of each of the 3 firearms that were recovered and whether Card obtained them legally?
So I think that the reality is that we'll have that information as part of the search warrants and as part of the investigation. I don't have it right now. That's my failing, not the ATF's. So I won't need the ATF to tell us what the make and model is. We will go to the ATF, however, to say when were these firearms purchased and who purchased them. And we'll know that initial component. That's a standard check that law enforcement do every time that a firearm is involved in an incident or a crime or anything else.
I appreciate that, sir, but the ATF is standing behind you. Can they provide that
They
information
can give you the same
now?
exact answer if you like. Would you like to answer that?
So as far as the firearms, as far as I don't want to misidentify models or makes, but what I can tell you as far as the firearms that have been recovered, they do appear to be purchased by him.
Legally purchased.
Legally purchased.
And was it 10 days before this incident? We have some information that he purchased it, some days before.
Yes, some days before. There's been a number of firearms that have been recovered as part of this investigation, and some of them have been purchased very recently, and some of them years and years ago.
Yes, sir. Right at the top. Yep.
Yeah, just a quick question. How many trailers are in that overflow lot, and do you know how many were locked and unlocked by any chance?
Those 55 or 60 trailers that are parked back there, and I don't know how many are locked versus how many are unlocked.
I'm sorry, you had to go through each one of those, and how long did that take to go through it, Chief? I don't know.
You can ask. So I think the reality there is that these officers in the first 3 trailers located him, but the tactical team ultimately located him, and I think that 3rd trailer. But do you have a question here, ma'am?
Distance between where the car was found and where the body was found is just about a mile, as you know. Can you talk about when you searched that woods trail and when you twice cleared the business?
So I don't know, Chief, as far as you're clear, do you know you want to step up and answer that?
So as far as the trails, we located the car and a perimeter was set up, as you can imagine. And I actually think it's less than a mile, give or take. But you can imagine where that business was that we spoke about tonight. That's a large industrial park. We're not just talking about a small area. We're talking large industrial park. But I can say that there was numerous resources from state police, all the local agencies, all the sheriff's departments across the state of Maine, federal agencies. We had helicopters in the air over that vehicle moments after I arrived, and I was the 2nd officer on scene. I can tell you that we flooded that area with resources. Someone brought up a question about canines. One thing with canines is we don't want to hinder scents. And I'm not going to get into all the details of the investigation, but I can assure you that there was a lot of teams that searched the area. On top of, I'll add one thing, on top of it being an industrial park, numerous different businesses. Obviously, there was one business that we were interested in, and our tactical teams did clear that building at Maine Recycling. And as he pointed out, there was a open door that was found that one of my officers found on the overnights again, and we cleared the building again with several agencies. But I'll just point out this: why this is all going on, we have to also understand everything we do is a methodical approach, and we got to be safe. We got to make sure our officers are safe. But we're fielding hundreds of calls at our comm center. And there was also the tip line that I heard today how many calls came in there. As you can imagine, it was an astronomical amount of resources being used across our community. Not everybody's in marked police cars. Not everybody's in full uniform. But there was a lot of resources from across New England that was here, including helicopters, moments after I arrived on scene when that car was located. So we used every resource that was available. And we were, I think it was this gentleman down here asked me, how long are you going to search for? Or do you expect to find him? Every officer there wasn't going home until we found the individual.
Just to follow up, the commissioner said the business is twice cleared. Was it twice cleared on Thursday, once Friday, twice Friday? When was the business cleared?
So Maine Recycling was cleared Thursday. It was cleared on Thursday. And then my officers, I'm trying to think, I had like 3 hours sleep over the course of a few days. But it was in the middle of the night. I'd say it was 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. My officer found it, and we activated everybody to go to that area and got other resources. I was in constant contact with the state police tactical team throughout this. I was in constant contact with Lieutenant Keaton from the state police, did an outstanding job. Greg Roy from Maine State Police, outstanding job communicating information back and forth. My hat's off to the state police because direct communication to me on my cell phone was great, and it was a coordinated effort. Everybody standing behind me from the federal level, Homeland Security, FBI, ATF. There was boots on the ground throughout the whole thing, assisting our agency. We all had a common goal to find him. It took 2 days, but we found him, and everybody could sleep good last night. So.
Just to clarify, searched on Thursday, then after midnight Friday?
Yeah, I can't remember. It would have been, I can narrow down the timeline. I don't want to give you the wrong timeline, but it was hours after. It was in the middle of the night when they found it. So, yeah, that would be about.
The business owner called you to tell you?
Business owner actually called our agency. We ended up speaking to him. I followed up with him. I have spoken to him. Yes, that is correct. I have spoken to him. He did reach out to us with that information. Correct.
What time was that? Unsearched trailer, this trailer that may not have been searched.
Not trailer. I mean, he's got an overflow lot of 55 to 60 trailers full of crushed up plastic and metal. This isn't a lot that's just all empty trailers. So I'm not going to get into more of the details on that. I mean, realistically, right now, we should all be really thinking about the victims. We also should be, The suspect's family as well were very forthcoming to law enforcement. But, we have all our national news and media partners here. And this tragic event that happened, that hats off to Chief St. Pierre and his agency. But right now, we want Maine to be remembered as the community that came together after this tragic event. I was on my way in this morning to this press conference, and I'm driving through Lisbon, and I see people walking the streets, people sitting on their porches, people waving thumbs up. It's what community's all about. So I'd say, I'm not going to say too much more at this point. I'm going to put it back over to him, but moving forward, we just be thinking about the victims. Thanks.
Can you tell us if there are any vigils planned over the next couple of days? Also, will students be going back to school starting on Monday? Will there be additional resources there? And lastly, is there going to be a heightened security presence in the town for the next coming week?
And to add to hers, is there any resources to...
One at a time. All right, so first, answer your question about vigils. I do know of one that at 6 o'clock tonight at the Rumbo site in Lisbon Falls, there's going to be a candlelight vigil being held there in Lisbon to remember the victims that tragically killed in Lewiston. As far as school, I'm still in communication with the superintendent of schools. I don't have an answer for you on that yet. And what was your other question?
The other question was, is there going to be a heightened security presence?
Yes, yeah, we have multiple extra officers on, yes.
Your department, well, all of you all's department, you guys put in a lot of work. How are you all doing? And what resources are going to be made available, if any, for the people who are working on this case for days on end?
I can tell you that personally, I can speak only for myself, but NAMI in Maine, as well as every crisis counselor has reached out to me from my department. We are scheduling debriefs for my department. Elizabeth Police Department was heavily involved as soon as it happened to go up and assist Lewiston right at the scenes. So I want to get those officers some assistance, but as you can imagine, nobody on my department wanted to go home until we found that individual. And I pretty much had to force them to go home and take a nap. So.
Chief, could you describe the moment that your officers opened that door, that trailer? Like, how did they make the positive identification? Just take us.
I won't be able to comment on that because we weren't involved down the trailer. So I'm going to put it back over to the. Thank you.
I appreciate that. So the Maine State Police Tactical Team are the ones that located this individual. And again, because of the appearance, the facial hair, the clothing, the circumstances, they were communicating back to Major Crimes, who was communicating with the Attorney General's office, the medical examiner's office. What are we all comfortable with in order to ID this individual positively and say, so we could come and say that this individual has been found and he's deceased and this is how he passed away. So that part of that identification process is pretty standard. And that's the process that we followed here. As soon as we knew that, the very first call that we made was to Chief St. Pierre to notify him that, again, that next level can occur. I'm going to take one more question, and it's going to be from you, ma'am.
Yeah, understanding that there has been no enforceable commitment to any kind of mental institution, can you tell us anything that you know about voluntary self-commitment that he may have had?
So the question is stating that there's no forcible commitments. Do we know of anything that's on the voluntary side? I know that we're seeking records and we're trying to determine if, in fact, that happened, what did it look like. There are reports out there that it did involve the military, his military unit. We don't have ready access to that documentation, so we're following up on that like we would with everything else. But I really, really do appreciate everybody's time, your patience, your professionalism. Thank you for taking care of our community. Thank you very much. Take care.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Chief St. Pierre, Lewiston Police Department. I wanted to thank Chief St. Pierre, Lewiston Police Department, Commissioner Shashchuk, Maine State Police, and all of the state and federal agencies that helped us through this. Thank you all so much. The City of Lewiston is committed to helping residents cope with this tragedy, and counseling is available for those affected 9 to 1 today at the Ramada for both children and adults. They can simply go there and receive counseling. I also wanted to thank our businesses who have provided overwhelming support for law enforcement, first responders, community partners, and residents. The donations, food, everything. Our businesses have really stepped up, and I'm extremely proud of them. So to Lewiston businesses, thank you very much. And to all the residents, you know, I love you. I'm grateful for you, and I appreciate the support you've shown each other the past few days. My heart goes out to the victims and families. And I also want to say that Lewiston is a strong city. We are a close-knit community and a resilient community. I know that we'll be okay as we move forward together as one Lewiston. Thank you very much.
Mayor, do you have any information about a vigil?
Yes, 6:30 p.m., Frank? Yes. So we, Sunday at 6:30 p.m., there will be a vigil at the Franco Center on Cedar Street.
You can check our website and our social media, and I think I have everyone's cell phone. I'll send it out to you all.
Mayor,
Thank you all very much.
Mayor, has the businesses, the owners of the business shared with you their intent, once the crime scene is cleared, are they gonna open up? Are they gonna open back up, or are they gonna tear down the businesses? What's their intention?
I cannot comment on that. Thank you.